Morning, everybody. Okay, Career Lab. Would we say week 2 starts right now? I'm going to go ahead and say week 2 starts right now. Welcome to Career Lab week 2, summer 2021. Last week, we worked on our stories, our personal stories, and how to talk about our experiences and got our LinkedIns up to date. This week, here comes Julia. This week, we're going to be working on the interview process. So Mindy's here today to talk to us about our take-home assignment. At Career Lab, you have a take-home assignment that you will complete. It's in Notion. It lives in GitHub, where there's a bunch of great information in the README. But Mindy has done several talks on this in this space of how to technically interview and how to rock it. So she's really well equipped to give you guys some really great insight on how to do this take-home assignment. But you're all going to do a take-home assignment. You can we've paired you up with somebody so that you can get started, but you'll each need your own take-home assignment, because that assignment is what you're going to send to the mentor that's going to be doing your technical mock interview. So with that, I will stop talking and hand it over to Mindy, and we can do questions and stuff at the end. Just make sure everybody is clear on what to do over the next week. So with that, Mindy, good morning.
Good morning. Nice to see all of you, meet all of you. My name is Mindy. I'm a software engineer at New Relic. I've been officially a professional engineer since January 2020, I think. So a little over 2 years at this point, right? Wait, time is a construct. The pandemic, I don't even know. I've been a software engineer professionally for a little bit now, at least. But I did actually get to be a part of the second cohort here with Collab Lab. So always have a special place in my heart, and just happy to kind of jump in whenever I can and share some information. So yeah, today I have a presentation for y'all. Oh, host has disabled participant screen sharing.
Sorry, I swear I'm getting to it, but I clicked share screen instead of security. All right, you're good to go now.
Okay, awesome. All right. Sorry, I should have had this a little bit set up more than I did. All right. It's not fully full screen, but we're gonna work with it. Okay, so today we're going to talk through a few different things. We're going to go through kind of the what, how, and why of a take-home challenge. We'll walk through our challenge as far as just kind of getting it set up on your own computer. And then we're kind of ending with some helpful strategies of things that you can take and move forward with your take-home challenge. So there's a lot of discussion in the community in general around take-home challenges, whether they're useful, whether they're not useful, what should they look like, how long should they take, do you pay people for the time that they're doing it? I mean, there's so much discussion around there, and you're going to find a lot of people with a lot of different opinions. It turns out I actually have a different opinion, I think, than a lot of people too, so I'll get into that a little bit. But there's the basic idea is that you're just taking it, you're having some sort of a task to show off your coding skills in some way or another. It should be relatively short, limited to 1 to 4 hours. If you think something's going to take longer than that, some hiring managers kind of expect that it will only take 1 to 4 hours, and it actually takes a lot longer. So communicating with folks, saying like, hey, this is going to take longer than that, or even if you're just like, this is just way too much. Some people just kind of like leave it on the table. I'm not going to continue with this particular job because it's just, they're expecting too much, and that's totally fine too. So just be aware and value your own time for sure. Some of them are timed. They have them on actual like platforms and that sort of thing. Some of them aren't. Some of them they'll just say like, hey, in the next couple days, get it back to us at some point, which is I think a little bit nicer personally, because putting stuff on a timer, that's not what software engineers don't do stuff on a 2-hour timer when they're working. So I like one of the reasons I actually like take-home challenges a lot is because it is, I think, a little bit more of a better indicator of what we do as software engineers and software developers, where um, we are often working, on our own. Sometimes, I mean, I love pairing and mobbing, and I won't even get into that, but we're often working on our own without those time limits. So to have something that is like a whiteboard, like live whiteboarding or live coding, it's a little bit different. There's a lot more pressure in that. So being able to take home stuff and show your chops, I love that. Like it's a great thing for me when I was coming into the industry, where I wasn't often given the chance to show what it was that I could do. And take home challenges were an opportunity for me to really shine and show, here's all the things that I know how to do. I can implement them in a way that's super clean and super readable. And, I knew how to do all those things. And it was super helpful for me to be able to show that off. Some of them, so back to this, some of them you are building from scratch completely, and some of them have the framework already built, and you're just kind of adding pieces into it. You're adding different features, that sort of thing. Sometimes they'll get those from like GitHub, where you'll have some source code. Like our take-home challenge is in GitHub. There's some source code. Some of it's already built, and you're going to be adding features onto it. Then there are just some examples here. Sometimes you're going to be following a design spec. You'll have like a visual representation of what something should look like, and you're building that to make it look similar. You might be connecting to or setting up an API, or creating a command line tool. Like there's all sorts of different ways that people will all sorts of different challenges people will give you. And like I said before, GitHub is one way that folks use it, or folks will give the take-home challenge. And sometimes with GitHub in particular, they might be paying attention to more than just the technical code. They're also paying attention to, the Git commit messages that you're making and the PRs that you're making into it and all of those sorts of things as well. Because the technical piece of it is not just, it's never just, can you technically get this thing done? There's way more to it, right? There's also the documentation aspect of it. Sometimes testing is an aspect of it, just general practice. They're looking for all sorts of different pieces of your code beyond just, does this run and does this do what I expect it to? That is important, and you should try to do that if you can, but there is a little bit more to it than just, does it run? Often this is done, I think this actually was talked about in the how to rack your interview the other day, but this is often done shortly after a phone screen. There'll be some sort of a technical piece in there. And like I said before, it's going to gauge your technical skills and also provides a discussion point for your next interview. So especially like that's something that we're doing here is we're sending you home with the take-home challenge. You're going to complete it, and then you'll have that to talk over in the next interview, the technical interview that you're having with us here at Career Lab. So that's pretty typical, actually, and it's very helpful. Let's see here. I would love to just take a second for questions and or other comments from other mentors on the call. If there are other things that you would particularly add to this or found interesting or something kind of unique that you've run into as far as a take-home challenge goes. Also, any differing opinions? Anybody like, I really dislike them and wish that they didn't exist or something like that? Nothing. I can't even bait you into a discussion about it. That's fine. Great. We'll just move on into the next section, which is really just about how our particular code challenge is going to work. So the idea here is that you are updating some source code for an app. It's going to take a string of text in, and it's going to convert it to either all lowercase or all uppercase characters. The full UI is actually already implemented, and you're just implementing some of the functionality there. So for example, if you had this as your input, this is some text. We have a mixture of different uppercase and lowercase letters. If you're going to submit it in uppercase mode, all of the letters will become uppercase. And if you're in, lowercase mode, all of them will be lowercase after you click the button. We're looking at a few different things here: correctness, code quality, and idiomatic code style. Those are kind of the things that we're going to just look at is we're getting ready to talk with you about your code challenge. Does it follow all the instructions? Is it readable? Is it well structured? Does it follow certain stylistic conventions like indentation and capitalization? I will say that's not the biggest thing in the world. Generally, people will overlook those code styles, and people have different opinions on code styles. But it is a discussion point, and it's helpful to have it be consistent throughout. I think that does look good as somebody who's trying to get into the industry. So our goals, ideally, this shouldn't take you any more than 2 hours to complete. And if it does, please be noisy about it. Let us know in the channel. And there is a thing I want to note here as well, where this particular code challenge is not about necessarily challenging your skills. It's more about experiencing the process. So it's not quite what you'd encounter from most take-home challenges in most interviews. They'll be a step more difficult than this. But we are creating this with the intent of focusing on, let's go through the process. Let's be able to use it as a tool in our next interview. So let's do this thing. Your take-home challenge is here in GitHub. And I'm going to copy and paste that into the chat as well. There you go. And your instructions are all listed out here about how to run this project on your computer. I'm going to go ahead and walk through this. We do also have an option to use this as a template, but I'm going to follow the instructions here. I think you could do it either way, but I'm going to do it here. So the first thing that you need to do is fork it to your profile. So there's a fork button up here. Second thing here is we're going to clone this to our local machine using git clone. The code button up here has the information you need. So I copy that and open it up in my terminal. Do git clone with that URL and open it up in Visual Studio Code for myself. I like Visual Studio Code. The next step here is just to run npm install and npm start. And this is going to take a few minutes. I'd love to take another break here and see if there are any questions so far on the challenge, anything that isn't quite clear what you're supposed to be doing yet.
Are people comfortable with forking a repo as opposed to just straight up cloning it?
I've only done it once, but yeah, I think I understand it. Thanks for walking through it also.
Mm-hmm.
I also want to really reiterate that this shouldn't take a super long time. And we've gone through a journey with this take-home assignment where originally we were like, it should take 2 hours. And somebody was like, it took me 12 hours. And so we keep paring it down and refining the instructions so that it's achievable to do in the 2 hours, but it still might not be. So like Mindy was saying, if you spend more than 2 hours doing it, like when you get to that 2 hour mark, stop. Let us know, because we can work through like how to still interview with a not fully complete assignment. Because like I said in the chat, there will be times when you're given a timed assignment. And so the thing that you give to them won't be a complete thing. And learning how to talk about that is a whole different skill as well. So be mindful of your time. Don't overdo it. If you want to continue doing more because you're like really enjoying it or just having a good time, that's fine, but still let us know that it is taking you longer so that we can be aware, because it's not our intention. So we want to make sure that for everybody, it can take under 2. And if you want to spend more time on it, totally fine, but do let us know.
Excellent. And it actually opened already automatically for me in localhost. So, well, I should say it is opening automatically for me because it has not fully. There we go. All right, and so this is what you're starting with. Currently, when you click on submit, this example text that is supposed to be converted returns your formatted text will go here. So it doesn't do exactly what it is that you're expecting it to do. And yeah, that's basically the instructions there, and like how to actually process getting this started and going. There is some more information here if you want to go back for directions that are specific. That information is all in here as well. What the expected behavior is, etc. So that'll get you started on the take-home challenge that we're doing. I'm also going to run through some just general tips and helpful strategies that you might find useful.
Before you do that real quick, I just want to share that in the chat, I shared the Notion page that is about Mindy's presentation here. And in that page, you can find the person that you've been paired up with to work through this take-home assignment. So the idea here isn't that you're pairing through one single assignment, but that you just meet up to talk about, approaches to it, strategies to it. You don't have to do the exact same thing, but just to kind of talk out loud about how you might do it, to get some different ideas from each other, so that hopefully that'll help you move a little faster through the assignment than working alone on it and kind of getting in your own head. I think we all know, going through Collab Lab, that talking these things out loud can be really powerful way to get your thoughts right and move faster. So your partners are there, so just reach out and collaborate just like you did during Collab Lab on scheduling a time together. That's all.
Awesome. Yeah, so some just general tips for whenever you have a take-home challenge. Focus first on getting something to work rather than maybe having it be the perfect implementation of whatever it is that you're doing. I am 100% speaking to myself in this one, because every time that I go to do a interview or a take-home challenge, I definitely focus on getting the right solution. There's always a lot of ways to do something, and it doesn't need to necessarily be perfect. Like, working is much better than elegant. So do focus on that first. If you have extra time or you want to spend extra time on it to do other things, then that's great too. Also, it's helpful to look at the problem and see if you can break it down into smaller pieces. What are the full steps of everything that you need to get to do? Think through those, and then start breaking it down into smaller pieces. And each time that you break it down into smaller pieces, you can utilize, or even as a whole, kind of depends on the problem. You can utilize a problem-solving strategy. I particularly like one called PDAC, and I did a tech talk here with Collab Lab on it a while back. I'm going to share the link to that as well, if I can find where the chat disappeared to. There it is. Okay, so there's the link to the tech talk itself, and then I also have a whole bunch of references and resources that you can use. There's some articles on PDAC that other folks have done. It's something that I learned at my code school, which is called Launch School, and I love it. It's super useful. I'll kind of give a brief little overview on what's going on here. On the right, you can see it's an acronym. It stands for problem, examples, data structure, algorithm, and code. And it's kind of just a step-by-step thing of how you approach a problem in a way that's going to be useful for you to solve that problem in coding, and also it's very helpful for communicating in particular. So definitely use it on your take-home challenge if it's something that's useful to you. Also think about using it in your technical interview, because it's going to be useful for you there too. Folks who do this often get really high marks on communication in interviews. So it's great. I love it. It also helps me a lot with my nerves because I do have a very specific set of things that I follow. Like the problem section of it, I always do a certain part of it every single time. So when I go into an interview, I'm super nervous. I'm like, I gotta, I gotta do coding in front of people. This is weird. And I'm nervous about it. If I just jump right into this process that I've really built and kind of, it's become a habit for me, my nerves are automatically calmed because I'm like, oh yeah, I know how to do this. I can do this. It's fine. So basic idea, the problem one is that you're just trying to understand the problem. So this is a great place to ask questions, write down kind of the summary of whatever it is that you're being asked to do. Try to break it down into the simplest pieces, find some edge cases if you can, like what if I'm getting null, or like what if that's the input is null? How do I handle that? What are the expectations of me here from the interviewer? The example section is all about creating examples, oddly enough, or test cases. So you're trying to say, okay, if I put 4 into this, what's going to come out? What do I expect? It's often useful to actually write it out as though you're calling the function, because then you can use it a little bit later for testing at the very end of your solution, which again looks really good. To be able to plop that down at the bottom of your code after you've done, and just say, hey, I'm running through all of these different test cases, you know, thinking through as many of those edge cases again as possible to hit all of those while you're coding, and make sure that your code actually hits all of those edge cases as well. Data structure is really just about starting to get an idea of how you're going to approach the problem. And it's just thinking through what data structures or data types you're going to be interacting with, and how that's going to affect what you're working on. So this can be both easy or hard, kind of depending on the problem, and also depending on your knowledge of a particular language. The more comfortable you are with a particular language, the more likely it will be that you'll be able to come up with a data structure fairly quickly. The next step is algorithm, and that's basically just writing out steps. It can be in pseudocode, it can be just complete plain language, and you're writing out how you're going to approach it, each different step, and then you're actually taking that algorithm and writing it out into code. The algorithm is usually very, very helpful for me because I forget where I am in the middle of coding. I figured out this part. What am I supposed to do next? Get a little bit lost. You can go back up to the algorithm and be like, oh yeah, that's the thing, and kind of keep moving through your code. So that's a very brief run through on PDAC. The Tech Talk does go through it in a lot more depth and gives you some examples to work through as well. So do feel free to take a look at that when you have time. For TCL in particular, we already covered this a little bit, but yeah, do work with your partner. And Stacey, you said you did link the Notion doc, is that right? Awesome.
Yep, it's in there. And if you if you leave this channel and you can't find it or whatever, if you go into Notion, it's under the page for Mindy's presentation where we talked about pairing with your partner. I'll put it in Slack.
Great. And yes, again, be noisy in Slack. If you are running into issues or it's taking a little bit longer than you expect it to, or if you just have a question like, hey, if I want to approach it this way, what do you think? Or something, you know, anything like that, feel free to share in Slack and communicate with us. And then once you're done, please send a link to the fork you made to your interviewer when you're done. That's a very important part. It's very helpful for the folks who are doing those interviews with you later, is to get that to them as soon as you're ready with it. So be sure to send that link. And that is actually all I got. So I'm going to open up for questions again.
Amazing. Thanks, Mindy. Questions, comments, concerns?
Is it clear what's expected of you and what your next steps are?
I'm just curious if there are any like really good or really bad take-home experiences anyone has had that would be willing to share.
I mean, I particularly enjoyed the one from New Relic. We did, yeah. I did the Ignite program was how I got hired in, and I don't know, I just found the instructions particularly clear. I knew exactly what it was that I was looking for. There wasn't any time limit on it, and the part of the reason I enjoyed it was because I took it from, you know, the take home, the doing it at home was great, having it was great, but going into the interview, like they were just super kind folks and were really open and willing to hearing what I had to say. And yeah, it was a good interview process in general. So it's definitely something that I enjoyed there. But the take home challenge was just very clear and not expecting too much, in my opinion. So that was my good experience. Anybody else?
I've had a few really good experiences and some really, really bad ones. I want to clarify that I've been doing this for a little while. I've been described as a senior software engineer, and I still get tripped up when code challenges don't make sense to me, or when they're not explained nicely, or when people aren't nice to me and make me feel like I'm a valuable opportunity for them. It feels like hazing a lot in interviews, and we try to avoid that at the Collab Lab. So try not to be nervous about what you're doing with us. We're trying to help you feel good and feel like you can really get on a team. You know. But one example of a really good experience I had was with a company that asked me only to talk about what I've done before. There was no code involved. They asked me to write something about what I've done, and then we would talk about my experience and my history with certain kinds of projects. And that was their way of saying, we know you have something to tell us, and we trust you to show that to us when we interview you later, which was really cool.
Yeah, we're actually hiring for a senior software engineer on my team right now. And so we've been going through that process of interviewing and like figuring out, okay, what kind of things do we want to send home with them? And it is an interesting thing. I feel like for me and again, I think there's a lot of room for discussion on this. For me, as someone who is entering the field, I loved having the actual take home challenge, and like, because again, it was an opportunity for me to kind of show my chops. I felt like I could do well in it. You also do often have, right, we have our projects that we worked on, we have TCL, we can bring that in and talk about it. If they don't do a take home challenge, we have that in our pockets. It's great. But it feels like a very different thing with a senior software engineer in particular, because often they've been coding forever. They have all sorts of things that they could talk about. And I think that's part of the discussion that comes up often is like, do we even do take home challenges for folks who've been working in the industry for a while? Like, is that even valuable, and what's the value in it, and that sort of thing?
Right. I didn't want to cut you off when you asked for comments earlier, but I actually have a strong belief that one does not need to see code to know that they can hire someone at a given level. I don't think I'm right necessarily. I want to see if data can prove that, because I think that when I've done interviews before, I can usually tell by talking to someone that they're not lying to me about what they know. You know, I don't want to haze anyone or quiz them, but I can tell someone's ability to think through concepts by discussing things with them. Now that said, there is a value in letting someone write code because they might not enjoy or feel as comfortable talking about concepts as they are going through them. And my priority is finding a way for a candidate to be their best self in an interview. And that means different things for a lot of people. And but then the problem with that is, you know, oh my goodness, my phone, I'm so sorry. The problem with that is that you need to be fair in your process. It needs to be meaningfully the same for everyone who goes through that interview cycle. And there is all I'm saying.
I love that. That's all great insight. One thing that I want to add to all this too is when Mindy was talking about tabs and spaces and making your code look pretty, I love that advice, because if you're like me and you're not particularly good at coding, it's like, lean on what you do know how to do. Do you know how to make things look organized and neat? Do you know how to leave good, thoughtful comments? Do you know how to, you know, structure things in a way that makes sense and is readable? If so, make sure you put that in there, because if you can't complete the assignment and get the thing to work, they can at least get an idea of how organized you are, or how, you know, like how you would be to work on a team. So try and get it to work, like Mindy said, first things first. But also, like, if you're like, I'm not gonna be able to get this to work, I don't know what I'm doing here, lean on what you do know. You do know how to make organized code. You do know how to talk about like your process and stuff. So try and make those things shine through.
I myself have had a kind of good and bad experiences. One was a HackerRank challenge for a front-end developer position, and it was kind of getting into the big O notation data structure stuff that was way beyond what I'm used to. I like the idea of working on an actual project and walking through it, but solving coding challenges I'm not a big fan of, just because I feel like I'm not trying to solve some puzzle, but I was surprised to get that challenge for this particular job interview. But yeah, I wasn't able to finish it in time, but I wrote in the comments like what I was trying to do at least. Didn't get that one, but then another one was kind of like a essay response to questions to kind of talk out your process, which I actually enjoyed, even though it took me longer. Everything always takes longer than they claim that it will be, and that could be on my end, but they actually paid me to do that one, and I got a pretty good response. So that one, despite the fear of writing out these paragraph long answers, it was actually one of the better ones that I felt pretty good about.
That's awesome. I feel like the trend of paying folks for time spent on technical take-home challenges is increasing. Like, I'm happy to see that that is a more regularly occurring thing. I know that that's been a source of contention for a while, especially because it does often take a long time. So it's great. I also have to say, hacker rank challenges are very unpleasant. Like, I feel like there's a lot of those websites that are, coding challenges to get you ready for an interview. I'm just like, oh gosh, I hate these. So I'm with you on that. It's not pleasant.
It was such a nightmare because it was also regex, and I was just like, oh God.
Regex kills everyone. We actually, my coworkers and I were having a discussion literally about regex yesterday and a particular piece of our code, and how someone was like, I can't figure this out right now. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to use a string instead of regex for this.
I've been doing this for a while now, like I said, and I still just look it up whenever I need a regex. I will go play one of those live regex IDEs or whatever they're called and just figure it out. You could not pay me enough to actually learn regex at all.
Yeah.
The only other part to this that was so scary was because it's in a hacker rank challenge, you got a notification, like if I went to look something up, it showed that I was like leaving the challenge to look something up, and it was kind of terrifying. I was like, oh God.
Gosh.
Yeah, there's a layer of that where you're not trusting your candidate to be a professional, which we all do look stuff up all the time at work. And it doesn't really reflect how you actually do your job, which is a big pet peeve of mine.
Yeah. I actually had a math professor when I was in college that would, he's like, you're never going to not have your calculus book with you when you need to do calculus. So it's open book all the time. And I feel like that's the same for coding. You're never not going to have your computer and the internet. I guess you could potentially not have the internet, but that would be unfortunate while you're coding. That's part of the job. Oh.
Other thoughts about take-home assignments in general, this particular one, experiences? I was kind of mentioning, like, sometimes you'll have timed experiences. Sometimes it'll be like, spend, 2 hours, but if you actually spend 5, we won't ever know. And I keep mentioning, like, if you don't get your take-home assignment done, what do you do? So from, Andrew, EJ, Mindy, Eddie, anybody, how would you say you should approach that situation if somebody gives you a take-home assignment and you either don't finish it on time, or you just look at it and you're like, I can't, what would you do? What should a candidate do?
I'm like, who's gonna unmute first? I feel like, I mean, if you're looking at it, you think it's going to take a long while, like longer than you expect. Gosh, I'm not sure entirely what I would do. I feel like I probably would work on it for a while and be kind of like, hey, and if I didn't get to a bulk of it in the time period, or within a couple hours of starting it, or whatever it is, and I felt like it was going to take a long while, I would reach out to the recruiter and just say, hey, this is the expectations for this seem a little off. and ask them what they would like me to do about it. You know, do you want me to complete as much as I can, or do you want me to, yeah, something along those lines, I think is probably the approach that I would take. I don't know for sure though, because I have not been in that situation. So I'm curious to see what other folks say, or other thoughts that they have, even if they haven't been to the experience either.
I haven't been in that situation, or I haven't had that situation come up, but I think me usually during the hiring process, if an interviewee came and told me like, hey, I was working on it, it seems like, you know, the scope is bigger than what it is. You know, can I take a few more extra days to complete it? I think that would be fine by me. I mean, it happens all the time when we're like building things. It doesn't be like, hey, it's gonna take, you know, a couple hours longer, or it might take a couple of days before I deliver it. Then we always adjust our timelines and our product roadmap. So at least for me, I think if that happened where I was interviewing somebody, I would be totally fine. I would probably give them some extra points for that.
Yeah, I just imagine this happens a lot. It happened to me once where I was asked to build a command line tool, and I'm like, command line? What? And so I tried to get as much as I could, and I did like what I was telling you earlier, like just give them a file that's like formatted really well and has kind of like my thoughts in it and some pseudocode. And I sent it over, and I'm like, I don't remember how I worded it, but high level, I was like, honestly, I don't think I'm going to be able to finish this in time, but I'd still love to talk to you more about it. And maybe we can have a discussion about, you know, like how one might solve this problem, or if I can get some tips from you, we can work through it together. And we did, and we got on, and this guy and I just kind of like talked through the ideas that I had written down in my file, and like started putting a little bit of code in place, but the time wrapped, and it seemed like a really pleasant experience, but then I didn't get the job. So I was like, I don't know how much of that played into it or not.
It sounds like the best way to handle that though. Like
I
I
have
would
to
be
imagine
if
it
I were
happens
on the
a
interviewing side of
lot,
that.
right?
Yeah.
Like these coding challenges that a lot of companies give are sometimes really unachievable.
I think at least on Twitter.
Yeah,
More
well,
often
and
than
I'm
not.
like, my concern is that people are like not being able to finish them, and they're not reaching out. They just give up. Like they just drop themselves out of the process rather than reaching out. And that's what I
Yeah.
don't want to have happen to collabbies. Like, if you can't do it, that's okay. Like, let's see what we can do instead of just giving up. Because I see people just giving up, and that's crummy. I don't want that.
My thing with these kinds of interviews is that people are never going to be the person that they could be at work, because they're going to be nervous about the interview itself. So even in a take-home environment, even when they're by themselves, they could be affected by knowing that they're going to be graded. If they were at work doing a ticket, they could probably be just fine. So if I'm dealing with an interviewee who doesn't complete the challenge, but I think that they have some things in there that they could show me, I would prefer to give them a chance to do that in some other way, rather than say, oh, you couldn't do this by yourself and I can't hire you.
Like there's in that there's this idea, technical piece is important. Like you do need to know how to code, but it's not the most important or the only important thing, like in being a software engineer. Like there's so much more that goes into it. And I bring that up with as many people as I can, as many times as I possibly can. Like being able to communicate and work with folks collaboratively is almost, if not more important, than some of the granular pieces of technical coding, if that makes sense.
I love that. I try and like shed that knowledge too, that like such a little bitty piece of my job is actual coding as a professional developer. And so much more of it is communication and coordination. And I also like when people are wanting to learn how to code and they're like, I don't know like math and science very well. I just don't know if I'd be technical enough. I'm like, look here, being a developer is about reading comprehension, not math and science. So just know that like Can you read? Can you understand things? Can you look through documentations? If so, you'll be a great developer.
I think we're, if there's any more questions, it might be wrapping up then a little early.
Yeah, I think so. And I've recorded this so that I'll post it in chat. Sorry it takes me so long to get these things into Slack. YouTube takes forever to upload things. And by the time that it's ready, I've already like gone to do mom stuff. So I will get this in there ASAP for our friends who aren't able to make it. The very next step will be finding your pair partner and scheduling and getting rolling on your take-home assignment. In the meantime, also check out in Notion your mentors that you're paired with for job fit interviews and technical interviews, and just start coordinating a time with them if you haven't already, so that it can be in the books early in the week so you all know what to expect going into the final week of your career lab. With that, I think we can all go our separate ways and get started. Yes. Okay. Thank you all for joining us today, and we will be in Slack if you have any questions. All right.
Cool.
Good job, Mindy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mindy. Bye, friends.
See ya.